my tutorial for the red guy character from Don't Hug Me I'm Scared is blowing up right now, and I'm getting a lot of the same questions and comments, which mostly equate to the time lapse makes it too hard to follow, what about the teeth, which is a new addition to the costume since I posted the original video, and what are the specific measurements. And that's just a result of videos from that era. At the time, long videos were not featured, not to mention my recording equipment at the time was not quite as good as it is now. It's a little hard to understand, but I still have the footage, so I figured I'd de-time lapse it and give some more precise instructions. So let's turn the volume back up here and watch the sketch. What's your favorite idea? Mine is being creative. How do we get the idea? You just have to think creatively. Ah, love the lighting in this shot. That's an in-joke from the show. If you haven't seen it, it's sort of a nightmare Sesame Street, like a Sesame Street that sort of devolves into chaos. Oh, and the way I'm getting the strands around the mouth to move like that is I'm literally just exhaling as hard as I can and then dubbing in the lines later. Now, if you're trying to achieve that effect in live action for Halloween, as most people watching the video around now are, then you can achieve a similar or better effect by using those pocket fans that some festival goers like to carry around on hot days. Like the one that I built into the backpack for one of my Among Us builds. Okay, now for the important stuff. For this build, I used red yarn, red or maroon felt, red paint, black craft foam or felt, foam semicircle. That's such a weird read on that. A foam semicircle. That one's 12 inches in diameter, which I believe is 100% accurate for a grown adult. If you're making this costume for a kid or someone of below average height, then you can use a smaller diameter. Those eyes are 2.5 inches, although if you do go lower, you're gonna have to make the eyes smaller as well. So just food for thought. Hot glue, scissors. Actually, you don't need razor pens or a box cutter for this one. What's going on? First, I made the eyes. I did this by cutting black foam circles and gluing them to the small spheres. Hot glue has a tendency to melt styrofoam, so you're gonna wanna put a dab of glue on the black foam first, because it's more durable, and then give it a few seconds to cool, like, I don't know, 12, and then put it on the styrofoam. Then I wrapped them in red felt. I think the ones in the show are actually maroon, but that's the sort of detail that you don't really notice, so I can get away with making them red. Like, for instance, one of C-3PO's legs is silver, but hardly anybody notices that. Not that I'm special, I didn't realize that until last year when some other YouTuber mentioned it. So just saying, my point is, no one will give you a hard time over changes of that minute nature, unless they're a jerk. In which case, walk away. Just walk away. Now that the eyes are made, it's time to work on the dome. I was concerned about the white styrofoam showing through the strands of hair, so I hot glued all the scrap felt to the dome before I attached the tufts of hair. Also, as I previously mentioned, because the hot glue melts the styrofoam, the felt is going to act like a protective buffer between the foam and the glue as I attach the hair. But you know, it's up to you. So the strands of yarn is another area where people got confused. The strands are roughly 15 inches long. I bundled them together and tied them off at one end, and I did that over and over and over again. I made a bunch of bundles, and I did that to give them more mass, because if you just go one layer deep, then it's very easy for people to see the spot where you glued them to the dome, and also see through the strands to the dome and your face as well. Originally, I mentioned that I wrapped the strands around a chair arm to get the proper length, but I didn't show that and people got confused, and so all I'm doing is just tying them to a fixed point as I work. You know, I shouldn't even mention it because it's confusing. Just make them 15 inches. That's it. Just make them 15 inches. Getting too into the weeds here. Then I hot glued each tuft of hair to the top of the dome. I also folded over the tied off end to hide it, sort of giving the impression that it's growing out of the head. So I made a whole bunch of these bundles. I did not remember the time how many, but I know that it took 2.5 skeins. Those are what those bundles of yarn are called before you unravel them. After the glue for the hair had set, attach the eyes with hot glue. So this is where I painted the remaining white areas of the dome red so that the white foam wouldn't show through. In order to do this, I had to turn the dome upside down. It might have made more sense to do this before attaching the yarn, but I built this quickly, and at the time I was concerned with the wet paint acting like a glue and the yarn sticking to it. Also, it getting all over the apartment and costing me my security deposit. And that's pretty much it. Nope, that's not it. I put a bicycle helmet in there just for the straps, just so that it would sit on my head and not move around. I did have to saw off the ends of the bike helmet so that it would fit, but again, if you're making this for a shorter person, then just forget the dome and use the bike helmet. The other question that I get all the time is whether or not I can see out of there, and the answer is yes. It's not perfect, but it's like looking through really long bangs. In fact, the strands are a little bit thinner in the front for that express purpose. Now, if you really want to over-engineer this, you could make little periscopes running from the eyes down to your internal eye line, if you feel like it. But I found it easy enough to just look through the strands and walk a little bit slower. Now, for the people who are doing the full body costume, it's just a red onesie. It's just a red onesie. I don't own a red onesie, so when I wear this once a year at conventions, I wear a suit. Mr. Anderson! What is that cadence? And red mittens, which is super specific to that one episode where he has an office job. Additionally, if you're making the version with the teeth, what you can do is you can take another semicircle, cut it in half. Actually, I think that's more like a quarter. Glue that half underneath, in the front, underneath the main semicircle, cut a small hole in the bottom for your neck, and carve a mouth and make teeth either by carving the styrofoam, which is messy, so I'm gonna use white foam clay. First, I rolled the white foam clay into sausages, then I covered the exposed, chewed up styrofoam in the mouth with them. These are gonna be the gums. And on a practical note, they seal in the flaky, serrated part of the styrofoam, so you won't get those annoying little styroflakes in your hair. And then covering the area around that with red felt. I'm actually gonna rip out my original felt because the seams are a bit too noticeable. For that specific shot, I mean. See how easily that hot glue came off? That's why I reinforced this seam with toothpicks. Then I painted the gums pink with acrylic paint to differentiate them from the teeth. Try to leave an exposed, unpainted part so that the teeth have something to connect to. This makes it harder to get the flowing yarn strand effect when he speaks, but you need to understand, for shows that have puppets in them, they have multiples. There's a version of the red guy that can be worn by a person for full body movement, and there's a version just for speaking to get the flowing mouth strand effect, and then there's a different puppet for the teeth brushing effect. Basically, they'll make multiples with different internals depending on what the scene calls for, and that's very common in the film industry. Then I made the teeth from the white foam clay as well by rolling them in circles instead of just back and forth like I did with gums, like your Tom Hanks trying to light a fire in Castaway. Watch too many movies. No such thing! After rolling them into spheres, I actually misshaped them so that they did not look like perfect pearly whites. Since this character is meant to be just a little bit disturbing, it's okay if the teeth are misshapen and unsettling. Then I inserted them one at a time into the gums. I want to point out here that foam clay shrinks about 20% over the course of a week as the water evaporates and it dries out. That's why you always gotta reseal your foam clay supply after you're done working. It'll dry out even faster if you're in a drier climate. So I have to try and keep that in mind as I work and make them oversized, knowing that they'll look a lot better by the time I get around to filming the beauty shots. Well, let's be real here. More like 3 days after I upload. Hashtag maker problems. Or would that be tuber problems? I think both. Then I use the styrofoam mouth offcut to trace an oval onto a sheet of red felt. I cut that out and hot glued it to the foam, being mindful to keep it aligned with the teeth. In order to get the edges to lie flat without adding wrinkles, I had to cut out the excess material with scissors and then glue the new edges together, making sure to pull them tight. This is referred to as adding darts. See, all the EVA foam techniques, they all come from tailoring. And I suppose leatherworking as well. Nah, it doesn't matter where. I almost got away with using 0 EVA foam in this build, but I think the pupils, the pupils are craft foam. Crazy. And that's how to make red guy. Teeth and all. One last note if you choose to make this particular version of the red guy costume. Since you have to pull the strands apart to show the teeth, you end up revealing your neck as well, which means you may need to disguise your chin and neck with the red balaclava? That's silly. There's people just spreading a red velvet baklava. I say words for a living. This is ridiculous. Or an old red shirt, creatively tied, looked like a ninja. Easiest Halloween costume ever. The ninja, not the red guy. Okay, that's it. Now don't forget to brush those teeth or they'll all go gray. You know, the irony is I've actually made it harder to see now. I'm looking out of the teeth, so I've basically just narrowed my field of vision to pinholes. I guess I'm gonna have to make periscopes. Alright, thanks for watching everyone. If you enjoyed this build, then you can subscribe and hit the bell icon to see upcoming builds. Because let's be honest, the subscribe button doesn't do what it used to, and if you actually want to get notified about upcoming builds, then you gotta hit that bell icon. Otherwise they'll be lost to the infinite scroll of your inbox. Be sure to leave a comment below to let me know what you'd like to see me make next. And lastly, I'd like to thank my patrons, the names scrolling by, on the right, left, right, somewhere. These videos just wouldn't be possible without the support of my patrons. So if you enjoy these builds, want to see more of them, and want your build request to carry a bit more weight, then think about heading on over to the Patreon page, where you can enjoy ad-free early uploads. Thanks for watching, happy crafting, see you later.